This episode of the Blindside Podcast is being recorded exclusively on Green Room. Be sure to follow on Spotify so you will not miss a single episode. Hello everyone, Blind Metal Gamer here, and it's now time for another episode of the Blindside Podcast. In tonight's episode, Common the Crusher and I are going to discuss a somewhat controversial topic within the realm of WWE, and that is the Chris Benoit situation. Yes, we all know what happened. We all know what happened over, it'll be 26 years ago this June when the events took place. But what Common and I are going to discuss tonight when he arrives in the room is what could have been done to save Chris Benoit's life. What could have been done to save him and preventing that whole situation from happening. We're going to discuss the events leading up to the situation. We're going to, then discuss what could have happened to save his life. And it's going to be a pretty good discussion, so I hope everybody will enjoy this discussion and will enjoy listening to it when it goes live on Spotify and other podcasting platforms. So, I'm going to give a brief history of what went down before Common gets in here. And that is, as you all know, on June 25th, 2007, Chris Benoit, his wife, and his son were found dead in their Atlanta home. And we all know what happened. It ended up being ruled a double murder-suicide. And the whole situation caused a lot of controversy within the wrestling business. It caused WWE to do a 3-hour tribute show to Chris Benoit the Monday following the events because they didn't know what to do. And then the Tuesday immediately after, you had Vince McMahon come out and saying, "Oh, we're not going to mention Mr. Benoit's name ever again." Now, with it being almost 26 years later, I figured, there's been a lot of theories go around as to what happened and all this. But the one thing that I wanted to dive into, and I've been wanting to do this for a while, is the fact that, I think that Chris Benoit's life could have been saved. I think all of that could have been prevented. I think it all could have been stopped if some precautions would have been taken about his mental health. As you all know, Eddie Gurerro died November 13th, 2005, and that had a profound effect on Chris Benoit. And when that did happen to Benoit, or rather, when it happened to Eddie Gurerro, which affected Chris Benoit, it had a profound effect on him. He, being Chris Benoit, when he found out, he just was wailing and devastated. He didn't know what to think. I mean, I'm sure he was freaked out. His best friend had died. And, if you watch Dark Side of the Ring, Chris Jericho described it as deep hitching sobs, and that his shirt was soaked. And all of that. So, we get to that. And then things went down. And then in 2007, the tragedy happened. So in 2007, the tragedy happens after over a year of Eddie being gone. Chris Benoit was writing in this journal to basically to Eddie, and Prior to that, he would go to the Gurerro house and he would be crying his eyes out and he would just be doing strange things. And I got to thinking, me and Common the Crusher got to thinking, what could have been done to save Chris Benoit's life? What steps could have been taken and what steps could have been done in order to save him? There was a lot. If you look at the evidence, again, presented by Dark Side of the Ring, when Eddie Gurerro's funeral happened, right afterwards, they all had to go get on a plane to go to England to wrestle. No, Vince McMahon, you don't do that. You know, when someone has just lost someone like Chris Benoit did, and is experiencing a very dark time in their life, you don't just say, "Oh, go to work." You know, no, that ain't what you do. If Vince McMahon would have given Chris Benoit time off to get himself together emotionally, mentally, and get the help he needed, because he desperately needed help, then his life would have been saved. Nancy's life would have been saved. Daniel's life would have been saved. The whole thing would have never happened. Another thing that they could have done was, okay, had the other people, like I said, go and do the pay-per-view in England. And if I were Vince, I would have paid for Chris Benoit to get the help he needed. I would have paid for him to get preferably inpatient help, because he definitely needed the psychological treatment, and he needed it badly. I mean, if you listen to what he said during the Eddie Gurerro tribute, and he went back to the back and he spoke about Eddie, and I'm sure you can find it on Google or YouTube or whatever. But if you Google it, you will see Chris Benoit basically breaking. You will see a man who was a very good pro wrestler, he loved his family, and he had good qualities, basically broke, and then the tragedy happens. And now all you get is this reputation of someone who, he offed his family or whatever, and then killed himself. You know, that reputation is going to stick with him forever. What he did in his illustrious career in pro wrestling is now overshadowed by that. And to me, that's not, that could have been prevented. All they had to do was get him the help he needed, get him away from the situation, get him counseling, get him grief counseling, get him services and supports to help him with the loss he had endured. And it wouldn't have been just a 30-day thing. It would have been infinite. I wouldn't have cared about, he's going to lose his spot, or he's going to lose his deal with being the top guy. I wouldn't have cared about that. I would have said, look, your job's going to be here when you get back. You go take the time off, do what you got to do, and do what must be done for you. Not for WWE, not for the belt, not for the company. He should have took the time. He could have took the time off to help himself if I were the one in charge. Now, again, I'm not. Vince McMahon is in charge, and Vince was going to do things his way. And Vince insisted that Chris go wrestle right after that funeral. And I think that was the worst thing that could have ever been done. I think that by doing that, that not only damaged Chris Benoit's emotions, but I think it contributed to what happened on June 25th. Because he being Chris Benoit, was taking vicious chair shots. He was taking very, very violent shots to the head. He was still doing his diving headbutt, which Harley Race advised him, don't even do it. He advised him not to use that move. And he does it anyway. And it destroyed his mind. It destroyed his psyche. And I think that, again, if circumstances had been different, if things had been different with the situation at hand, and if had Chris been given time off to get himself together emotionally, psychologically, mentally, I think that would have never happened. And again, I'm not glorifying what happened. I find it disgusting. I find it appalling. And I find it offensive. It shouldn't have happened. I'm doing this to explain what could have been done to prevent that from happening and what could have been done to prevent a senseless tragedy from occurring. And I think that if anyone is listening that knows, what happened and was there firsthand or whatever, that was experiencing it at the time, I think that they'll probably either agree or disagree with me, and that's fine. But I think that, again, Chris Benoit needed professional help. He didn't need to be wrestling. He didn't need to be competing in a WWE ring. He needed to be getting the treatment he needed, getting the psychological help he needed. He needed to be getting himself back on track and then focus back on the wrestling. It's like with any other type of thing. If you need treatment, you go get it, and then you come back and you focus on what you're doing. Unfortunately, they weren't thinking that way. In 2007, their thought was, okay, here's our top star. He's got to go to London to compete. Or he's got to go to the pay-per-view, I think it was No Way Out, to compete against, it would have been CM Punk. And, come on. And I think if common sense had prevailed and things would have been different in that aspect and in that regard, we would still have one of the greatest technical wrestlers in the world with us today. However, things didn't, and it didn't. Now, again, when and if Common does show up, he'll be giving his analysis as well on the situation. So while we await his presence, I will still continue conversing about what I think could have been done. I've already talked about time off to grieve and time off for mental health help and things like that. I would have just said also, okay, during that time, spend time with the family. Just have some family time, because I'm sure he probably missed that a lot, being on the road and being in a situation where he had no contact with his wife or child, and his child had a disability, Fragile X syndrome, I do believe. By the way, shout out to This Is Monsters for that information. And, I would have been like, okay, get yourself together and spend time with the family, come on. There's no need for nonsense like that for for that to happen. Okay, do what you got to do emotionally on this. Now, on the flip side, let's say on the hypothetical, let's say Eddie Gurerro didn't die. This is something else I thought of too over the years. And after reading or listening to conspiracy theories and all these theories about what happened, I think that Eddie was a confidant to Chris. And Eddie was someone that Chris could confide in when things were going bad at home. Chris would call Eddie up and say, "Hey, Eddie, I need to talk to you about this." And Eddie would probably say, "Hey, what's going on, man? Let's just talk." He would probably lend Chris his ear, and Chris was able to vent. When Chris Benoit didn't have that anymore, what happens eventually? He slowly mentally deteriorates and snaps. He slowly mentally deteriorated, and then eventually he snapped and all that went down. And I think that if Eddie would have not passed away in 2005, Chris Benoit would have had someone to go to, someone to confide in, and I think that, again, that would have helped him. So I think with Chris Benoit losing that confidant, and losing the person that he confided in the most, which was Eddie Gurerro. He lost that one true thing. Yeah, I'm sure he had Mrs. Guerrero as well and Chavo and all those folks. But I believe, and this is only based on observation, the one person that he always confided in was Eddie. And when Eddie died, in '05, when he left us because of heart disease at the age of 38, that pretty much took Chris Benoit and it made it to where he was pretty much going to go down the path that he did. Now, he shouldn't have done it, but things happened, and it happened. As for Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, yeah, they were the closest of friends. They were like brothers. I remember on, I believe it was the Hard Knocks DVD that I own of Chris Benoit's. He even said that he and Eddie were very close of friends. Eddie, and Dean Malenko were like the three amigos. And with that, you had that bond and that connection. And what I don't get is, okay, Eddie was gone. Why didn't Chris go to Dean Malenko or someone like that, for emotional support or something of that nature? It just baffles me that Benoit didn't. He had his options, that he could have went to, but I think, personally speaking, based on observation of the conspiracy theories and all this, that man needed to be away from wrestling. He needed to be away from WWE. He needed to be getting the help he needed so he could come back stronger, better, faster, quicker, and be right in the right frame of mind mentally. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I don't think his mind was in the right place. I think Chris Benoit's mind was in such a dark place and in such a dark state of being, it just led to what happened. And I think that if Vince McMahon would have just been a little more lenient and said, hey, go on and do what you got to do, get the help you need, take as long the time you need, then things would have been different. But he didn't. Vince McMahon was like, oh, you got to go wrestle after the funeral. You got to go do this. If I were Vince, I would have said, no. You're going to go home. They're all going to go to England and do their thing, but you're going to go home and get the help you need. That's what I would have done. Just, what I think could have saved Chris Benoit's life. And again, throughout this whole piece of podcasting, I am not going to sit here and say, oh, I glorify what happened, because I don't. I'm just talking to you about what I think based on, just observation and theories of what I think could have happened, what could have been done to save his life. Again, I'm no psychology expert. I'm no psychiatrist or psychologist. My topic of conversation tonight is speculation only. It's not fact. I'm not saying it would have helped. I'm saying it could have possibly helped to negate that situation and to make it where Chris Benoit wouldn't have done what he done and things would have been different, because I'm sure that he was struggling not only with the pressures in the marriage, but I'm sure that with the child having special needs, he was probably freaked out about, oh, what am I going to do in terms of supports and services? He was probably freaked out about what was he going to do as far as support services for the kid, and it was probably the pressure was getting to him so bad that I'm sure he made a lot of money, but I'm sure that there were things outside of wrestling that ate that up, and he probably needed support for the child, and he didn't know what to do. And eventually, like I said, things all happened, and he snapped, and all that happened. But I think if Chris Benoit would have been given the chance to just go home, clear his head, seek some help, for everything he needed help with, including the kid and getting his marriage on track again or whatever it may be. He could have been um, a situation where that tragedy could have been prevented if he would have been given the time he needed. But he wasn't. They just were tired and said, go do the pay per view. Now, do I think that Vince McMahon would have given him that? Honestly, no, I don't. Because Vince McMahon needed Chris Benoit as his top star. He needed Chris Benoit to be the star of his company. And I'm going to be honest with you, I think they may have been grooming Chris to be WWE champion or world champion. Actually, yeah, he did win the world title at WrestleMania 20. So they were actually wanting to groom him to be a main eventer and to be on top and be king of the mountain on WWE. And then all that happened, and it just went out of control for him. So I think that coupled all of that with what happened, I think that it all was just a time bomb and a ticking time bomb of emotion and other things, and it all just exploded in one culmination on that weekend in 2007. I remember personally watching the Monday Night Raw. I was watching, I think they were doing the thing with the limousine with Vince, and it exploded. They were going to do who killed Vince. I get on in front of the TV. I see in memory of Chris Benoit. I'm like, what? And then it all unfolds. I'm like, oh my God. And then the next day on ECW, they finally found out what happened. And it was almost like, oh, damn. Not good. So, again, over the years, I've been kind of listening to all these theories, all these conspiracy deals, and I wanted to just do a thing and talk about what I think could have been done to help Chris Benoit, to help that man, to save him. I'm not talking about the wrestler. I'm not talking about Chris Benoit, the WWE superstar. I'm not talking about the Rabid Wolverine. I'm not talking about the Canadian Crippler. I'm not talking about none of that. I'm not talking about Pegasus, Kid or Wild Pegasus. I'm talking about what could have been done to save Chris Benoit, the human being, the man, from what happened. I think that if he would have been given time off to do what he had to do, that would have done it. I think that giving him just infinite time off to do what he needed, or maybe not infinite, but maybe a 6 month or 9 month time frame, maybe a year. Or they could have done the Roman Reigns route and told him, okay, he's going to be out indefinitely until it's time. I would have said, look, take your time and be out for as long as you need to be. Get your crap together and do what you got to do for your fans and do what you got to do in the wrestling ring. Now, again, that didn't happen, but that's how I would have handled it. And I would have started that the day or the minute that Eddie Gurerro's funeral and all that was over. I would have had Chris Benoit go home and begin immediate treatment because that's what he needed. He didn't need to be wrestling. He didn't need to be out taking bumps. He didn't need to be out cutting promos or none of that. He needed treatment for what he just experienced on a psychological level. And I think that had he got that treatment and he got the help that he needed, I think that things would have been different. And the wrestling industry would be a lot different as far as it's concerned today. Now, again, it looks like everybody common will not make it, so I think it's just going to be me. Again, I mean, you never know. Things could have been different. It still could have happened. But I think that by lessening the chances of that with proper treatment and supports and services. Oh, comments here. All right. All right. Common the Crusher is here. Hey, Common. Let's see here.
There we go.
Hey, Common, you're here.
There we go. There we
All
go.
right. So what we were discussing was I was giving a brief history of what happened to lead up to the tragedy with Chris Benoit and his family. And as we were discussing the other night, okay, I talked about what I would have done to maybe help save Chris Benoit's life. Now I'm going to mute and let you talk about what you would have done to help save Chris Benoit. So as of now, the floor.
Well, what I would have done to help save his life, I would have checked on him a lot more. I would have had Vince, anybody else there, other wrestlers, maybe other people that's on the staff, just call him and check on him daily, because what he was going through, and everything in his mind with Eddie's passing and everything else, that was the one thing that really just drove him. And plus, it was other things too. He was just going through a lot, but I would have reached out a lot and made sure he was okay, or even flown out to see him.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I mean, I would have, like I was talking about earlier. I think what it was, Eddie, and you might agree with me on this. You know, his son, Chris Benoit's son, had a disability. He had Fragile X syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
So with him having that, I bet you what it was. Not only was Chris struggling with the wife, but he was probably struggling to get supports and services for his son. And Eddie was his confidant.
Yeah.
Eddie was the one he could call up
Mm-hmm.
when he was going to have an angry moment and say, "Hey, I need your ear." And Eddie was like, "Tell me." And he probably vented to him. And when he lost that in 2005, he slowly went down.
Yeah.
And I think that if, I was talking earlier, Dean Malenko, he could have talked to Dean. He could have talked to Chris Jericho. But I think, and I'm with you on, send him home, have the guys go out to check on him, call him, be a support system because he needed supports. He didn't need to be in a wrestling ring at all.
He definitely didn't need to be in the ring.
No.
Because he was still grieving.
Yes.
And most people do when they grieve, especially maybe I see it in celebrities when they grieve, some people like to just work.
Yep. Just work to get it out of their system and not think about it. You have to go through that process. It's an emotional thing. It's part of the healing process. And I'll go on and break a bit of a kayfabe for you. When I had events happen to me 5 years ago, it took at least a few days to get in that mindset to work. It took some time. I mean, I had to work after some events in my life, but I was given the time I needed. He didn't get that. Chris Benoit didn't get that. He was not. They just said, get on the plane and get over to England. No, that was wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was
Vince
wrong.
McMahon shouldn't have done that. And I hope, and I think that if Vince by chance is listening to this, I want to just go on and say this right now, Vince McMahon, you were wrong for doing that, and you shouldn't have done it.
Well, trust me. I can imagine that there's not a day that doesn't cross his mind. And I know it's coming up on what, 17 years?
Let's see. It was 07.
No, 15.
17.
15. It's 15 years.
Yeah, Eddie Gurerro died in 05. That's going to be 17 years for him this November. So I'm sure that
Yes.
Vince is thinking about, what could I have done or what if? Well, it's too late. And I think that Vince really did not. I think that now they talk openly about mental health, and they tell the guys, okay, if you need
Yeah.
to take time off to get
Yeah.
help, go take it. And I bet that's what contributed to it.
Yep. Yeah. Because mentally, Benoit wasn't Chris wasn't the same.
No, he was not. His mental prowess was not where it needed to be. And I think that if he would have been given the chance to go and take the time off and get what he needed and have the supports in place, it would have been a much different situation.
Yes. Yeah. It would have.
Oh, yeah. So, what would you have done? Okay, we talked about, what you would have done as far as that. So, what would you have done as far as the whole situation of with helping like with the kid, like how would you have helped with the family situation that may have happened or been happening at that time?
Uh, basically, try to get the help that they needed for taking care of his son.
Exactly.
Because I know, I
Right.
don't know if they really had a lot of help. I don't know.
I think from what this is monsters. By the way, shout out to Mr. Monster and this is monsters. Um, from what his podcast said, they wanted to be secretive about Daniel's condition. Chris didn't want a lot of people knowing about it, which was a mistake.
Hmm.
And here's why. Again,
Yeah.
I'm sure he was of that mentality of, oh, my son's not like he's going to be like everybody else and all this. I don't want. And I get he was probably going through what other parents would go through without a disability. And I think that again, if he would have been made aware
Hmm.
of support services back in '07, there wasn't a lot. There wasn't like it is today. You've got
Right.
Able, you've got all these other amazing things that are out there. Back in '07, you didn't have it. It was just starting out. And I think that if some education would have been given to him and his family on that type of stuff, I think that that would have alleviated the burden that he was going through. It would have alleviated the
Yeah.
burden he was going
Exactly.
through.
Hmm.
It would have alleviated a lot of the stress because I'm sure it stressed him and Nancy out considerably knowing that okay, we got this son with a disability. What are we going to do to care for him? So,
Hmm.
what would you have done? Okay, all right. So, as for real quick, we've talked about take giving him time off. We've talking about supports. What else would you have done immediately when you found out about? Let's say Eddie Gurerro, passes. Chris finds out. What would have been the first thing you would have done?
I I would have went to Chris. I would said, Chris, do me a favor. Take the time off. Don't come back. Don't come back. Don't come back until you're ready to come back.
Yep, I would have
But
said, look,
I know how
you.
close you and Eddie were.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. I would have been like, look, take the time off. Don't come back until you're comfortable with it. You'll still have a job. Don't worry about being the
Yeah.
top guy. We'll figure that out when you come back.
Right.
That's what he. But
Hmm.
still, again, all of this I think are things he needed and didn't get.
Yeah. True.
And again, we're not
But
here glorifying the events. We're not here glorifying what happened. We're discussing
no.
what could have been done to save this man's life. And I think that
Exactly.
we've got some good ideas. We've kicked around some good ones. So, do you have any other suggestions, other things that could have been done maybe to help him out?
I mean, oh man. Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, we covered just about everything.
Yeah, we have.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I wonder if the WWE tried to like, hey, if you need some counseling, we can help you. I wonder if that was even brought to the forefront.
I wonder that too, because I don't think it was, because according to Dark Side of the Ring and the This Is Monsters YouTube channel and podcast, he never got that. That was never brought up. It was just get on the plane and go. You know, they didn't even offer him that. It was just you get on the plane and you go.
Yeah, because in WWE's eyes, they wanted to keep him working.
Right.
That's what they want to do. As Vince would say, the show must go on. But
see, that ain't healthy.
That's not healthy.
No, it ain't. No, it is not. And I think that if things would have been, but then again, back in 2007, they didn't know about. Well, they probably knew about mental health, but
no, they probably knew, but
they just didn't address it like they do today. Today, a wrestler goes in crisis, they're out for XYZ amount of time.
Yep.
Exactly. But back then, it wasn't that way. The show had to go on, and you had to present your product. Like, okay, I'm going to use an analogy that I don't know if a lot of you Green listeners and main Spotify listeners know, but Common and I do a Twitch stream. And what's the one rule that we've always had, that if you need to take time off for any reason whatsoever, you take it.
Just let you know. Speak up.
Yep, and that goes even for me. Like over the weekend, I took some time off because I wanted to get some, just a little break in, But I said, hey guys, no stream tonight. That's all it takes. Yep, just speak up and say, hey, I need the time, or I'm going to take time off or whatever,
Yep, as we always talk about in the Yes Group, self-advocacy. Speak up.
Yep. Speak up for what you need or what you desire. So I would say the takeaway from all this would be, if there are any pro wrestlers out there that are struggling with any mental illness or any type of mental health issue that need the help, advocate to your promoters, advocate to your fellow wrestlers, speak up about what you're going through, and get the help you need.
Exactly.
And do you have any messages for any promoters out there?
Well, to our promoters, if something's wrong with one of your stars, or just your stars, I don't care if they're on the top, middle, bottom, check on them. See what's going on. See how they are for the day.
Yeah, I mean, so if Vince McMahon or Triple H or Tony Khan or anybody who's listening to this that happened, or Jim Cornette or anybody that's a promoter in the business, if you're wrestlers, not sports, if your wrestlers are in need of help because of some mental health issue or whatever, lend your ear to them. Don't just be Mr. Big Shot and be like, oh, I'm not going to help you. Lend your ear to them and get them the help they need when they need it. Because what we don't want in the business is another Chris Benoit situation. And we're talking as fans, not as wrestlers, not as promoters, not as bookers, but as wrestling fans.
And I'm pretty sure the wrestlers that go on the road 300 plus days a year, that mentally affects them. And I'm pretty sure that they get stressed out and they need a break.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I remember on a bunch of documentaries, Ric Flair would tell stories about going year-round without a break. They would go all year, just boom, 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 boom. Now I think they get like 2 weeks off for Christmas, and I think they get like all the Thanksgiving, they'll get the holidays off. But other than that, they're just constant go, go, go. But I think that if and this is just, again, a message to promoters before we do our thing here. If your wrestlers are in need of help or are in crisis, get them the help they need and do it ASAP.
I wouldn't even say ASAP. I would say AQ.
Yeah, AQAP, because We don't need another situation like that happened back in 07. We don't need it. Because it will just hurt the industry even further.
Yeah.
So, all right. With that being said, this has been another episode of the Blindside Podcast, and the first episode to be recorded using Green Room. So, Common the Crusher, do you have anything you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, shoot, just reach out to somebody. If you're going through something, going through mental health, take time off, talk to somebody about it.
Yes. Take time off, talk to someone, be it a family member, a close friend, a confidant, counselor. Do what you got to do to get the help you need. With that being said, this has been another episode of the Blindside Podcast. The next episode will be recorded and streamed on YouTube over at youtube.com/blindmetalgamer on April 10th, 2022 at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time as Kentucky Blue Blood returns to continue her story of what it was like growing up in the 1960s. So until then, for Common the Crusher, I've been your host, Blind Metal Gamer, saying so long everyone, and peace out.
Good night.
Thank you for listening. This has been another episode of the Blindside Podcast. You can find the Blindside Podcast on a plethora of platforms, including Spotify, YouTube, Pocket Cast, Castbox, TuneIn Radio, and much more. Be sure to follow on Spotify so you will not miss a single episode.